Hello friends, welcome. Friends, many of you who are following my video which I am doing in YouTube must have seen this sheet, Excel sheet. Now this Excel sheet I had done when Vodafone announced that DOT is raising its stake from 22% to 49%. And the purpose of this Excel sheet is to predict that how much is going to be the liability for Vodafone going forward end of FY26 till FY30. So I predicted that by end of FY26, that is 31st March 26, Vodafone Idea has to pay roughly around 18,000 crores as fees to DOT installment. And then going forward, this is going to increase. Now, if you look at Vodafone Idea's revenue, which is roughly around 40,000 crore, their EBITDA margin is 40%, which is 16,000 crore. Therefore, they will not be able to pay this, right? In spite of the fact that was a relief by DOT, but this is not going to be payable. So what will happen? DOT has to do something on AGR, which is because the AGR dues are the highest. If they don't, then they have to raise their stake in Vodafone Idea beyond 49% and will become 56.5%. So friends, the reason I'm doing this video is to figure out and analyze that what DOT can do on this 16,432 crores, given the past constraint and given the history that we have seen, different type of cases and all kind of battle which had gone into. So that's the whole intent, means what options DOT has now to deal with this, right? Whether those are practical and whether those are implementable or not. So that's the whole purpose of this video. I have done an article on this and I will paste the link of that article in the description. And if anybody is interested in reading and without going through this video, they can get the complete understanding of the subject. But those who are interested in listening, please just be with me and you will be able to understand what is going on, right? So in order to make the discussion structured as usual, I have created certain slides. So this is the title of the presentation as well as the title of my article. AGR dues in Indian Telecom, what went wrong and what can still be done, right? Now this is an in-depth analysis. By the way, this is such a big issue. It is impossible to zip the whole thing in 20 minutes, which I'm planning to do. So friends, I am going to go a little bit fast, but trying to cover the summary of the overall discussion. And since I don't edit my video, it will be a big challenge. So be with me. I need to be focused. Now friends, before I get into the details and make you understand what is the situation and what options DOT has in order to deal with the Vodafone Idea's dues, which are going to be extremely important for the Vodafone Idea to maintain competitiveness and to maintain control, let's go to the key events. Now, these are the dates. You can pause the video and have a look at these dates. The most important of all this date is the 24th October 2019 Supreme Court judgment. In this day, Supreme Court quashed all the proceeding which was happening in the favor of the telecom operators. Till that day, most of the legal proceeding as well as TRAI favor the telecom operator. From this day onwards, the whole thing was drastically turned around. Though on 2011 also, Supreme Court quashed the jurisdiction of TDSAT to decide the terms of the contract, but this was the watershed moment, 24th October 2019. And then, because the judgment was so harsh, the DOT filed a modification request and they pleaded before the Supreme Court that, look, it is such a harsh judgment that DOT was defending in the courts and fighting the mobile operators. They themselves were taken aback by the harshness of the Supreme Court judgment. So they filed a modification request in the court of law that please give some relaxation. But court did not take the full relaxation request of DOT, which was for 20 years deferred payment at the rate of 8%. Court says nothing doing. It will be 10 years. Yes, I will give you deferred payment, but you have to make a 10% payment before 31st March 2021. And both Bharti and Vodafone paid 10%. They paid more than that. Bharti paid more than that. Vodafone paid roughly 10%. And the next installment was supposed to be due on the next year. Because of moratorium, it became due on 31st March 2026, and that's why this crisis has now emanated as far as Vodafone is concerned. And the final installment deadline is 31st March 2031. This is sacrosanct. That's why if you go through Vodafone Idea's annual statement and if you look at the spectrum installment, you will find a key difference here. The difference is that the spectrum installment actually got staggered upward as regards payments are concerned. Means the period actually got extended. Whereas the AGR thing, if you look at and if you take into account and look at the spectrum payment and think that the AGR should have also got an extension of 4 years, it was not because of this deadline which was set by the Supreme Court, right? So this is what is the basically the timeline and for you to make you to understand what the issues were, right? Now let's go to the introduction of my presentation. Now here what I am saying is that the Supreme Court, as I said, Supreme Court in 2019 imposed heavy financial burden on the operators. Now friends, how much was the burden, which we are going to talk about in the next slide. If you do the calculation, you will find that the principal was just 1/4 of the total amount. Let's say the 100 was the total amount, principal was 25%, and the rest of the amount was interest, penalties and interest on penalties. That is why Supreme Court's duty said that let's bail the industry out and sort some relief. But Supreme Court became very, very harsh, and judgment actually triggered a sectoral distress and almost in the verge of reducing competition, and that's why we are so concerned. Now, the dissecting AGR liability. AGR dues included, as I told you, principal, interest, penalties and interest on penalties. Majority is dues is interest, penalties and interest on penalties. 25% is only principal. Court stand was quite punitive to ensure compliance, not for sectoral revival, because if you look at the judgment, I'll show you the judgment, and the words that have been used in the judgment is so harsh. That is why people are scared. And I'll give you an example why those harsh words actually exploded BSNL's AGR liabilities. To an extent, it became 2.3 times, much higher than the other operators' AGR liabilities. And you will find that very, very interesting. Now, pending dues installment schedule. Now, you know that Bharti and Vodafone both have paid more than 10% as mandated by Supreme Court. Due to the moratorium, dues have got compounded by 8%. So, Vodafone will owe roughly around 74k crore and Bharti will owe around 38k crore. It may differ slightly based on, because I might have used some calculation and those people know exactly what the calculations are, but be with me, it will be in the ballpark range of these numbers. And as I told you, dues have to be paid in 6th installment because you can't extend the period, because 31st March 2031 is the deadline set by Supreme Court, unlike in case of spectrum due where the installment periods have been extended going forward because of the moratorium. Okay. Now what happened with BSNL? This is very important. Original dues of BSNL was 10,000 crores roughly. Right, which is BSNL and MTNL included. BSNL was 5,835 crores and MTNL was 4,352 crores. But Supreme Court said in its judgment, right, that 10% have to be paid before 31st March 2021. Right, but no 10% payment was made by BSNL MTNL because this judgment was applicable for all telecom operators, including the PSU operators also. So I think what happened was, because the government settled the dues later, therefore the numbers went pretty high. And I'm going to show you how the numbers got changed. So if you look at this particular sheet, Excel sheet, and let me just zoom this sheet a little bit more, you can clearly see that the dues were settled on 3rd May 2023, right? The date of allotment was 12th May 2023. Now here the number was 26,894 and then there was another amount of 1,667 because the shares have been allocated and these have been extracted from BSNL's annual statement, so can't be wrong. But I think this number went overboard because of the GST component of 4,000 462 crores also included. But still, it is pretty high. It is 2.3 times the number which originally, which I told you, was 10,188 crores. So that is what got inflated. But rest of the operators, because they went with the Supreme Court judgment that they paid 10%, and then the government of India came out with the moratorium. Therefore, for them, the interest and interest on penalties were not applicable. Only the 8% interest is getting compounded, and that's why the principal is now had got inflated at the time when the moratorium ends, right? So let's go to the next slide. Now, are there any relief options left? The legal routes are all closed. Why? Because curative petition has been dismissed by Supreme Court. Now, friends, now I'm going to show you that how harsh was the judgment and why the curative petition got dismissed, right? You know that the curative petition got dismissed, and we will look into that also. But before I go into this, I will show you that how harsh was the judgment. Now, this is the judgment. Let me just show you the judgment. The end of the this is not this, right? I think this is the judgment. Yeah. Okay. So let me pause the video and get you the judgment. Right. So if you see that when the DOT filed the modification petition, after that the Supreme Court came out with this judgment, which was on 1st September 2020. Right? And I'll show you the DOT's modification application also, right? What kind of pleading DOT made. But let's look at the judgment on the modification settlement. So it says, it starts from page number 46. It says that for the demand raised by the Department of Telecommunication in respect of AGR dues, based on the judgment of this court, there shall not be any dispute raised by any telecom operators, and there shall not be any reassessment, right? And it also goes on to say that at first instant, the respective telecom operators shall make payment of 10% of the total dues demanded by DOT by 31st March 2021. The TSPs have to make yearly installment commencing from 1st April 2021 up to 31st March 2031, payable by 31st March every succeeding financial year. Then it goes on to say that in the event of any default in making payment of annual installment, interest would be payable as per the agreement along with the penalty and interest on penalty automatically without any reference to court. Means whatever interest, whatever penalty and whatever interest on penalty which made it 4 times, those are going to be applicable without any reference to court. So if you miss an installment, then you had it. Beside, it would be punishable at contempt of court. Let compliance order be reported by all TSP and DOT every year 7th of April for each succeeding year. Right? This is what it is. So you can understand the harshness of the judgment. And now I'll give you what DOT basically tried to do. So if you go to the DOT's modification application, so this is the DOT's modification application. Here, the application of modification dated 24th October 2019 for permission and detail as the application 1 to 10. So let me just show you the modification application, and you will understand what DOT, if you read this, you will find that DOT is trying its level best to tell the court, please, for heaven's sake, don't be so harsh. Right? So you can read it. You can say that I'll just show you, certain, because court was extremely annoyed with DOT because of certain court officers passed some, some internal order not to take any penal action against the telecom company after the judgment, right? So you see this, adverse impact on competition in the telecom sector, adverse consequence on consumer, adverse impact on quality of service. This is what DOT is writing, implication on banking sector, disruption of tax and non-tax account revenue, license fee, etc. Right? And then it says central government has taken decision to seek approval of this honorable court on a formula arrived at recovery of past due from the telecom service provider. That is, DOT proposed a formula. This formula will be placed before approval and permission of the Honorable Court, arriving at a detailed long-term deliberation at various levels of government in administrative hierarchy, including cabinet, and keeping the vital issue relating to the financial health and viability of the telecom sector. Right? Pray this Honorable High Court may please suitably modify the judgment and the order dated 24/10/2019 and dated 24/2/2020. So this is the recovery consideration by the Honorable Court. This is what DOT is saying. DOT is saying annual installment for 20 years using a discount rate of 8%, interest on unpaid amount will be protected by NPV, and then it says that determine after reconciliation between TSP self-assessment, DOT's assessment had to be added to adjusted dollar payable on the installment. So this is what. Then it says admit and allow the petition application, permit the application to recover the amount due and payable so and so, and it says that in the event of this Honorable Court being satisfied to grant payer 2 above, the Honorable Court may also please suitably modify the order so and so, right? So this is, so if you read it, that you will find that DOT really tried its level best to subdue or somehow subdue the harshness of the judgment, but was not successful. You understand? So why this is so important and why the curative application got rejected by the court? Because there was nothing left to be done. The court has clearly said, if you look at this order, the final order which I just showed you, just before this, this one. Where is it? This, I think this one. Yeah, this one. So here you see that there will be no reassessment. You say there shall not be any dispute raised by any telecom operator and there shall not be no reassessment, right? It is clear. There is no way you can do anything. It's clear. So when you read this judgment, any court will say that, there is no point in even opening the curative petition. So there is absolutely no way courts will help now, right? Now let's go to the PPT, right? So it's very clear the legal route is closed. Curative petition dismissed by SC. 3 possible options now remain. What are those 3 possible options? Let's look into those, right? So let's look into those. Let me just pull my pen a little bit here. So the options are these. Extend the moratorium, right? Interest continues, final date remains on 31st March 2021. So what your duty can do, if you look at this Excel sheet, they will say, okay, you don't have to pay this, I am going to extend this year by year. But it will not help. Why it will not help? Because 31st March 2031 is the date. You will keep accumulating interest, and when you decide to pay on 31st March, you can't really breach that date. That date is final. 31st March 2031 is final. So even if the moratorium is granted, the payment is going to be due at some point of time. So we can't anyway circumvent that. Okay, so what will happen? This number, which is currently around 74 or 75,000, will keep on exploding for both Bharti as well as for Vodafone, right? Vodafone numbers are different, Bharti are different. So that is one. The second is convert AGR dues into equity. So if you do that, then what happens? As I told you here, if you look at this, if you convert AGR dues into equity, then Vodafone share will go beyond 49% to something more, 56 or something, right? But there has been a precedent. You have done it for BSNL, right? You see here, I showed you that Excel sheet. BSNL, you have done it, so Vodafone. So that is possible. 2 things are technically possible. You can give deferment, as you have already done. The Supreme Court judgment has not been violated. We have already a precedent, and you have converted your dues. You have capitalized AGR dues. You have done it for BSNL. You can do it for Vodafone Idea also. And what is the third? Third is, you need to get a legislative bill or some kind of policy to be passed in the parliament to get a waiver on interest on penalties or on dues. Now here, when you start doing this, this will give Vodafone Idea complete, you can say there is no need for Vodafone Idea to make any payment further if they are able to waive the dues, right? Or some dues are taken care of because of a parliament waiver, which was already in news earlier, that they are thinking of completely taking away penalties. They are going to give a 50% rebate on interest, and those were finally did not work out. But this is possible. You can't rule this out. But there are implications of this. The implications are as follows. What are those implications? We know that Bharti has paid how much? Bharti has paid a substantial amount, 18,000 crores, right? And what was dues of Bharti? So if you look at this document which the Government of India had filed, This is the document, and if you go to page number, let me just go to page number, just a minute, go to page number 180. Go to page 180, right? So if you go to page 180, in that page, I think, yeah, you do it. If you look at this, you will find that Bharti Group's obligation was 44k crore, out of which they have paid 18k crore. So if I do a calculation, 18 divided by 44, so 40% or 41% has been paid, 59% is left out to be paid. Now, if you are going to give a rebate of 59% in proportional to Vodafone Idea, then you can say that, look, Bharti, you don't have to pay anything further, because otherwise Bharti has to refund the money, which probably will become a pain, right? As regards BSNL is concerned, that can be dealt with because this number is anyway inflated and the government can tweak here and there and deal with BSNL because this is not a big number. They will be able to manage it, which I think. But Bharti will be a problem. So what I believe is, so if you go to this number, which is 74,000 crores, right? 74,000 crores or 75,000 crores. So if you see here, 74 multiplied by, let's say you give a rebate to Vodafone of 60%, 59%, because that matches with Bharti. So it comes out to be how much? What? You give a rebate of 44.4. So if you multiply this by 0.4, then Vodafone Idea has to pay only 30k crore instead of 74 or 75k crore. So their liability will become less. And then you can deal with this within the timeline of 31st March 2031 or by use the executive order to give a further deferment. So now everything is in the hand of the government, right? This is possible, which I explained to you right now here. The legislative waiver by the parliament possible, but the government actually has to deal with backlash of opposition. Because whenever the government tries to come out with any scheme which kind of relinquishes some of the dues, there are a lot of attack on the government, that government is trying to help the big companies or the big, you can say, the promoters, right? So that has to be dealt with, and we as public has to behave responsibly because it is in our interest, right? Vodafone Idea actually stays in business, because if Vodafone Idea goes out of business, the market is going to become completely monopolistic and our interest has to be impacted. So everybody in the market, including the public, including the opposition, actually has to behave in a responsible manner. I think legislative partial waiver by the parliament and then dealing with the Supreme Court judgment, undoing certain harshness of the Supreme Court judgment and the final date of 31st March 2031, if they are able to manage somehow, then probably this Vodafone Idea's cash flow, which they have to pay going forward, can be somehow managed, and Vodafone Idea can be prevented in some way to become a government company, because 31st March 2026 is a very crucial day. By then, Government of India has to take a decision. You can't push this further, except you can give further moratorium. That is possible, but the issue is not going to get completely killed. You are not going to die, right, friends? So I think, friends, you understand the whole issue about AGR. Just go and read my article, which I'm going to paste a link of that article in the description, and you will get a very good understanding what the situation is. There is no other way out than what I've described in this video, friends. Thanks for listening till the end. I'll come back with a new video next time on a new topic.